Marcus had never expected his life to take such a strange turn. As a human diplomat, he had traveled to many planets, met countless alien species, and negotiated deals that could have affected entire star systems. Yet nothing in his experience had prepared him for the invitation he now held in his hands. It was a thick, shimmering card, not sent by any ordinary courier, but projected directly into his apartment as a hologram. The script was elegant, almost musical, curling and twisting, in ways that made it look alive. At the top, a symbol he had never seen before glowed softly, a golden spiral surrounded by tiny floating orbs. The text read simply, "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Princess Ilara of Virelia. Your presence is requested as an honored guest." Marcus blinked. He reread the message, thinking perhaps the translation software had made a mistake. Virelia, Princess Ilara, wedding, him, as an honored guest. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. The last time he had heard of Virelia, it was as a planet renowned for its floating cities and intricate politics. Humans had little formal contact with the royal family. Why would a princess of a distant alien world invite a human to her wedding? Curiosity and a small spark of excitement overcame his hesitation. Marcus had always been drawn to challenges, to situations where humans were underestimated. This was a perfect opportunity. Packing for the trip was harder than he expected. Virelia had a climate that fluctuated in strange ways. Its atmosphere could change from breathable to mildly toxic in minutes, depending on the city's altitude. Clothing had to adjust automatically to temperature, humidity, and even subtle energy currents that humans couldn't perceive. Marcus consulted his wardrobe assistant, which hummed quietly as it selected the most appropriate attire. A sleek suit that shimmered faintly, perfectly blending human fashion with interstellar practicality. The journey itself was uneventful, though the view was anything but. The transport shuttle carried him through the star-strewn expanse of the Virelian system. He passed massive moons and gas rings that reflected light in dazzling patterns. When the shuttle finally descended toward the main city, he could see floating platforms stacked hundreds of meters above the ground. Bridges of light connected them, glowing softly, as if the city itself was alive. At the landing dock, Marcus was greeted by attendants whose appearance made him pause. Virelians were taller than humans, with elongated limbs and smooth, reflective skin that shifted color with their emotions. Their eyes were luminous, large, and expressive in a way Marcus had never seen before. They spoke in a language that vibrated, like music, but a small translator device in his ear converted it instantly. "Welcome, honored guest," one attendant said, bowing with perfect symmetry. "Princess Ilara awaits you. Please follow." Marcus followed cautiously. Every movement felt ceremonial. Even walking on the platform seemed like a performance, and he feared one misstep could insult the entire royal family. Finally, he entered the grand wedding hall. Words could not describe it. The ceiling was open, revealing the swirling clouds of Virelia's sky. Light danced across the hall in ever-changing patterns, bouncing off the translucent walls and reflecting colors Marcus had no names for. The crowd inside was immense, filled with Virelians in elegant robes and aliens from dozens of other planets, all gathered in what appeared to be a celebration of galactic unity. Then he saw her, Princess Ilara. She floated slightly above the ground, her long robes shimmering like liquid silver. Her eyes glowed faintly, and when she smiled, Marcus felt a strange warmth, though he had only seen her for a moment. She was beautiful, yes, but more than that, she carried an aura of confidence and intelligence that made the room seem small, by comparison. Before Marcus could gather his thoughts, an attendant approached him. "You are requested to join the ceremonial circle," they said. "All honored guests must participate in the pre-wedding ritual." Marcus hesitated. He had studied Virelian customs extensively, but this ritual was not in any of his reference materials. Ignoring it could be seen as disrespect. Nodding quickly, he followed the attendant. The ritual was confusing. Participants stood in a circle holding crystalline objects that hummed softly. Energy flowed through the hall in visible streams, connecting the objects to the participants. Marcus tried to mimic the gestures of the Varelians around him. He waved his hands, moved his arms, and repeated the sequences he had seen. He did not notice the small misstep, a brief alignment of his hand with Princess Ilara's crystal at the wrong moment. The energy surged, a soft golden light connecting them. Marcus felt a strange pull, almost like gravity but warmer, gentler. Around the circle, the elders whispered and nodded. "You are bonded," one of them announced. Marcus froze. "Bonded?" he asked, uncertain if he had misunderstood. The elder smiled. "Yes, you and Princess Ilara. By ancient custom, the bond is recognized. You are pledged to each other. Do not fear. It is a great honor." Marcus's mind raced. He had read about the Varelian bonding ritual, but he never imagined he would accidentally trigger it. This ritual was traditionally reserved for arranged matches, partnerships that lasted a lifetime. The concept of romantic consent was different here. By Midesh, their laws, he was now bound to the princess. He glanced at Ilara, who raised an eyebrow, her expression unreadable. She said nothing, but her slight smile suggested amusement rather than anger. That made things even more confusing. Was she impressed? Was she testing him? Marcus had no idea. Honored to meet you?" Marcus stammered, unsure how to react. Humans were not used to being bound by alien rituals, especially not at the moment of their arrival. Ilara inclined her head gracefully. "You are aware, I hope, that our customs are not yours. But accidents do not diminish the honor. Come, you must stay for the ceremonies. It is only for a week, after which the bond may be fully accepted or formally dissolved. But no offense. Can come to you if you follow the customs." Marcus swallowed. A week, 7 days, stuck in a foreign culture, bound to a princess he barely knew. Yet something in her tone. It was warm, not threatening. The attendants led him to his quarters. It was luxurious, with walls that shifted to show calming images of oceans, forests, and skies. His bed hovered slightly above the floor, and a small table prepared a meal that glowed softly, indicating its optimal nutrition and flavor. As he ate, Marcus reflected on what had happened. He could try to leave, but any attempt to break the bond prematurely could insult the royal family and cause a diplomatic incident. He had two choices: endure the week and hope for understanding, or try to navigate a foreign court under extreme pressure. The first night was strange. He lay on the hovering bed, staring at the ceiling as the light patterns shifted with the rhythm of the planet's atmosphere. Outside, he could see the floating city glowing against the dark sky. He imagined what humans would think if they knew a diplomat had accidentally become pledged to an alien princess. Sleep did not come easily. Thoughts of what the next day might bring, ceremonies, tests, interactions with Ilara, kept him awake. He realized something surprising. Despite his anxiety, he was curious. Curious about the princess, the culture, and the strange, beautiful world he had stepped into. When morning came, Marcus dressed in the ceremonial robes provided for him. They shimmered with soft light, adjusting automatically to his movements. As he entered the hall, he saw the princess waiting for him. She nodded in greeting. Marcus bowed. A gesture he had learned was proper in Virelia. "Good morning, Princess Ilara," he said carefully. "Good morning, Marcus," she replied, her voice calm and melodic. "I see you have adapted well." Marcus swallowed, uncertain how to respond. Adapted? He was still fumbling with customs in his mind, but her smile was encouraging, and somehow he felt that whatever happened next, he could face it. The first day of ceremonies began. He learned rituals, social customs, and even participated in light physical exercises that tested agility, balance, and coordination with his bond partner. He was clumsy at first, but his human adaptability helped him catch up quickly. Ilara observed, silently, occasionally offering advice. Marcus noticed her eyes sparkled when he solved a tricky task in a way no Varelian had expected. A small thrill ran through him. Humans could surprise even the most advanced civilizations. By the end of the day, Marcus felt exhausted but oddly exhilarated. He had survived the first day, learned a few customs, and even earned a small nod of approval from the princess. As he prepared for bed, he realized something. This trip, this accidental bond, could be more than a diplomatic duty. It could be the start of an adventure unlike anything he had ever known. A week seemed long, but if he faced it with wit, courage, and respect, perhaps he could turn an accidental ritual into an extraordinary opportunity. He lay back on his floating bed, staring at the shifting lights, and whispered to himself, "Well, Marcus, welcome to Virelia. Let's see what happens next." Marcus woke to another day on Virelia, the sky outside his chamber glowing with soft shades of gold and lavender. The floating city above the clouds seemed alive, moving gently as if it were breathing. His mind was still buzzing from the events of the first day. He had survived the initial rituals, managed to avoid insulting anyone, and even impressed Princess Ilara with his quick thinking. Yet he knew the real challenge was only beginning. Today, the royal family had summoned him for a private audience. Marcus adjusted his ceremonial robes, which shimmered faintly and changed hue according to his movements. It was a simple mechanism, but one that fascinated him. Humans were always intrigued by how other civilizations used technology, especially when it was woven seamlessly into culture. As he walked through the corridors of the palace, Marcus noticed the subtle elegance of Virelian design. Walls were not fixed. They rippled with energy, forming patterns that reflected emotion and status. The floors hovered slightly above the ground, and light bridges connected distant platforms. The attendants moved with quiet grace, acknowledging him with gentle bows as he passed. Finally, he arrived at a large chamber. Inside, the king and queen awaited him, seated on chairs carved from a single piece of translucent crystal. Their presence was commanding, yet not intimidating. Marcus bowed deeply, careful to follow the proper etiquette he had been taught. "Marcus, human diplomat," the king said, his voice deep and melodic. "We understand that the bond you entered was unexpected, but our customs are clear and we trust you will honor them." Marcus swallowed nervously. "Your Majesties, I did not mean to enter any bond. It was an accident. I only intended to observe and participate respectfully." The queen inclined her head slightly. "We understand, but accidents are part of life. You are here now, and the bond cannot be ignored. What matters is how you conduct yourself from this point forward." Marcus nodded. He felt the weight of their words. This was no longer just a social faux pas. This was a diplomatic situation with potential consequences for Earth. Any misstep could offend the royal family, or worse, strain relations between humans and Virelia. Princess Ilara entered quietly, gliding to stand beside her parents. She regarded Marcus with an expression he could not fully read. Was it curiosity, amusement, approval? Perhaps all three. "Marcus," she said softly, "I have observed you during the rituals. You are clever and adaptable, which is rare. Most of our guests would have failed completely." Marcus blinked. "I thank you, Princess. I am doing my best." Ilara smiled faintly. "Your best is interesting. That is all I will say for now." The king spoke again. "Marcus, you will remain here for the 7-day bonding ceremony. During this time, you will learn our ways, our culture, and our expectations. At the end, the bond can be formally accepted or respectfully dissolved. Until then, you must follow our customs and show respect to your bond partner, Princess Ilara." Marcus felt a mix of relief and anxiety. A week did not seem too long, but the intensity of the ceremonies and social expectations promised to be exhausting. Yet he also sensed an opportunity, a chance to understand Virelian culture, to demonstrate human ingenuity, and perhaps even to impress the princess. The audience ended, and Marcus was escorted back to his quarters. He barely had time to unpack before another attendant arrived to guide him to the first official bonding session. The session took place in a large chamber filled with soft, floating light. Crystalline platforms hovered above the floor, each radiating a gentle hum. Marcus and Alara were instructed to stand on adjacent platforms. The exercise involved synchronized movements, requiring coordination, trust, and focus. Marcus struggled, at first. Humans were not naturally attuned to the subtle energy flows of Viralia. He stumbled, nearly lost his balance, and felt the edges of his platform shift unpredictably. Alara watched silently, her posture perfect, her movements fluid. "You must sense the flow," she said calmly. "Do not fight it. Move with it." Marcus took a deep breath. He closed his eyes, felt the vibrations of the platform, and attempted to mimic her rhythm. Slowly he began to move more gracefully, matching her steps. When he opened his eyes, Ilara's gaze held a trace of approval. "You learn quickly," she said. "Most humans would have fallen by now." Marcus allowed himself a small smile. "Humans can be surprisingly adaptable." Ilara raised an eyebrow, and Marcus noticed a faint blush in the glow of her skin. Perhaps she found his humor refreshing. He was careful not to push it too far. Diplomacy, after all, extended to relationships of all kinds, even accidental ones. The next hours were filled with lessons in Virelian communication. They practiced storytelling exercises where emotions were conveyed through subtle light patterns rather than words. Marcus found it difficult, but his human creativity allowed him to find alternative ways to express himself. He used gestures, tone, and timing to complement the light patterns, and Alara responded with interest rather than impatience. By the afternoon, they were led to a garden terrace. Floating plants hovered in midair, petals glowing softly. Marcus had never seen flora like this. Some flowers reacted to emotions, changing color based on happiness, curiosity, or fear. He extended a hand to one, and it shimmered a bright blue, a sign of excitement. "You understand the basics quickly," Alara said. "It is unusual for humans." Marcus chuckled. "We may be fragile in some ways, but our brains can adapt. We find solutions where others see problems." Alara tilted her head, her glowing eyes studying him. "I see that. Perhaps that is why this bond is interesting." Marcus felt a strange warmth in his chest. The word interesting sounded like a compliment from her, even if it was subtle. For the first time, he felt that this accidental bond could become something more than an obligation. That evening, Marcus attended a formal dinner in the royal hall. Aliens from across the galaxy were present: diplomats, merchants, scholars, and nobles. Marcus was nervous about interacting with such an audience. Any misstep could cause embarrassment or offense. Yet as he observed, he realized that humans often had an advantage in unfamiliar situations: creativity and boldness. When a debate arose over the proper interpretation of a ceremonial tradition, Marcus cautiously offered his perspective. He explained how human societies use symbols differently, but still valued respect and cooperation. To his surprise, the aliens listened. Some nodded, others looked curious. The Virelian elders whispered among themselves. Then one approached him. "You have a unique perspective," the elder said. "It is rare to see someone outside our culture understand and respect our ways so quickly." Marcus felt a surge of pride. Humans were not just observers, they could contribute. He glanced at Ilara, who had been watching him quietly. She smiled faintly, a subtle acknowledgement of his efforts. After dinner, Marcus and Ilara were left alone for a private discussion. They walked along a balcony that floated above the city. Below, the lights of the platforms glimmered like stars. "You are different from anyone I have met," Ilara said. "Most of my suitors follow rules blindly. You challenge them. You think for yourself." Marcus smiled, feeling a connection forming. Humans are often underestimated. We survive by adapting, learning quickly, and sometimes breaking patterns that others cannot see. Ilara's expression softened. "Perhaps That is why I find you intriguing, not only for the bond but for who you are." Marcus's heart raced. This was unexpected, and yet somehow it felt natural. He had come to Virelia as a guest, thinking he would observe and perhaps impress diplomatically. Instead, he found himself forming a genuine connection with the princess. As they returned to their chambers, Marcus reflected on the day. He had navigated complex rituals, impressed the royal court, and even earned the interest of a princess. Yet he knew challenges lay ahead. The remaining days of the bonding ceremony would test not only his adaptability, but his courage, intelligence, and understanding of an entirely new culture. Lying in his floating bed, he thought about the week ahead. Each day would bring new trials, new lessons, and new opportunities to prove himself, not just as a human diplomat but as a partner worthy of Princess Ilara. For the first time, Marcus felt excitement. This accidental bond was no longer a mistake. It was an adventure, one that could change his life and perhaps the perception of humanity in the galaxy forever. The morning sun of Virelia rose slowly, casting golden light across the floating city. Marcus awoke, feeling the weight of anticipation. Today, the 7-day bonding ceremony entered its most challenging phase. The first 2 days had been gentle, introductions to Virelian culture, but now he would face physical, mental, and social trials designed to test the bond between him and Princess Ilara. As he dressed in the ceremonial robes for the day, Marcus examined his reflection. His suit shimmered softly, changing hues with his mood. He could see hints of anxiety reflected in the glow, but along with it, there was determination. Humans had survived worse odds. They adapted, solved problems, and turned challenges into opportunities. This was no different. An attendant arrived silently at the door, bowing low. "Marcus, Princess Ilara awaits at the training hall. Today, the first trial begins." Marcus nodded, taking a deep breath. He followed the attendant through corridors that pulsed with soft light, the walls rippling as if alive. He had started to appreciate these subtle changes. Virelia was a planet of constant motion, and everything here required attention, perception, and flexibility. When he arrived at the training hall, he was greeted by a sight that made his stomach tighten. The room was enormous, stretching high into the floating ceiling. Platforms of various shapes hovered in midair, moving slowly in different directions. Light streams connected them, pulsing gently, forming a sort of pathway. At the center, Ilara waited, her posture elegant and serene. "Good morning, Marcus," she said softly, her eyes glowing faintly. "Are you ready for the first trial?" Marcus swallowed. I think so." Ilara smiled faintly. "Confidence is part of it. Follow my lead and focus on the flow, not the obstacles. The trial tests coordination and trust, not strength alone." Marcus studied the platforms. They floated at different heights and distances, some spinning slowly, others moving unpredictably. He realized this was more than just physical balance. He needed to sense the rhythm of the platforms and move in harmony with Ilara and the energy around them. The trial began. Marcus stepped onto the first platform. It wobbled slightly under his weight, but he adjusted quickly. Ilara moved gracefully. Beside him, her movements precise and fluid. Marcus followed, trying to match her timing. At first he stumbled, nearly falling off a spinning platform, but he took a deep breath, focused, and adjusted. "You are improving," Ilara said, her voice calm. "Do not think too much. Feel." Marcus nodded, letting instinct guide him. Slowly, he began to move more confidently. The platforms seemed less threatening, and a strange sense of rhythm began to develop between him and Ilara. They moved almost as one, each step building trust. After the physical trial, they rested briefly. Marcus wiped sweat from his brow and looked at Ilara. She was radiant, not just in appearance but in presence. The Virelian energy around her seemed to enhance her focus, her grace. Marcus realized that adapting to this culture required more than physical skill. It required understanding, empathy, and mental flexibility. Next came the mental trials. They were led to a chamber filled with floating crystals, each containing a visual puzzle or pattern. The task was to interpret the emotions embedded in the crystals and respond appropriately, often in coordination with the partner. Humans did not naturally perceive such subtle energy flows, but Marcus had learned to observe patterns and find connections. Alara pointed to a crystal that pulsed with green and violet. "Describe the emotion and respond in harmony," she instructed. Marcus studied the crystal. He noticed the rhythm of the pulse, the subtle shifts in color. "It is curiosity mixed with cautious excitement," he said carefully. "I respond by mirroring the rhythm with a slight adjustment to our movement." Alara nodded. The crystal glowed brighter, signaling a correct response. Marcus felt a rush of pride. Humans might not have Varelian energy perception naturally, but their creativity and analytical skills allowed them to adapt quickly. For hours they worked through the crystals, each trial becoming more complex. Marcus began to understand not only the mechanics but also the underlying philosophy. The bond was about balance, trust, and shared understanding. It was not simply a test of skill, it was a test of partnership. By midday, Marcus felt a bond forming, not just through the rituals, but through the subtle connection he and Alara were developing. Her guidance was patient, her observations precise, and occasionally, when she smiled or offered encouragement, he felt a warmth that was impossible to ignore. The afternoon brought a social trial. Marcus and Alara were introduced to a small group of visiting dignitaries from neighboring planets. Each guest presented a challenge, a question, or a cultural puzzle. Marcus had to respond while remaining in harmony with Alara. Humans were known for diplomacy and improvisation, but the complexity of alien customs made this difficult. The first guest, a tall, serpentine diplomat, asked a question in a tone that subtly tested Marcus's understanding of Varelian hierarchy. Marcus paused, considering. Then he spoke, using a combination of respectful language, humor, and insight. Alara mirrored his tone perfectly, adding subtle movements that aligned with the energy of the room. The diplomat's eyes widened, a faint glow indicating surprise and approval. Marcus felt a small thrill. Humans could navigate alien social situations when they relied on observation, logic, and intuition. The next guest presented a more physical challenge, a light puzzle that required coordination between Marcus and Alara. At first, Marcus misjudged the energy flow and stumbled. Alara's soft touch steadied him. "Focus," she whispered. "Feel the rhythm. We move together." Marcus obeyed. Slowly, they solved the puzzle, their movements synchronized perfectly. The room responded with approving murmurs, and Marcus realized something important. His bond with Alara was growing stronger. It was no longer just a duty, it was an active connection, a shared understanding that transcended language. As evening approached, they were guided to a terrace overlooking the city. Floating lights reflected off the clouds below, creating a surreal, dreamlike scene. Marcus and Alara sat side by side, silent for a moment, simply observing. "You have done well today," Alara said softly. Most humans would have given up. After the first trial, you persist. Marcus chuckled. Persistence is part of being human. We adapt, we learn, and we find solutions. Alara tilted her head, her eyes glowing faintly in the twilight. I can see that. Perhaps that is why this bond is more interesting than I imagined. Marcus felt a rush of emotion, the word interesting again, but this time it carried more weight. It was not merely acknowledgement, it hinted at curiosity, admiration, and perhaps even affection. He smiled, unsure if he was reading it correctly, but feeling encouraged. Nonetheless, they spoke for hours, discussing customs, philosophy, and their thoughts about the galaxy. Marcus was fascinated by Varelian perspectives, and Alara was intrigued by his human ideas. Their conversation flowed naturally, bridging the gap between two very different cultures. That night, Marcus returned to his quarters, exhausted but exhilarated. He reflected on the day's events, the physical trial, the mental puzzles, and the social challenges. He had survived, adapted, and even thrived in ways he had not anticipated. But more importantly, he realized that this accidental bond was no longer a problem to solve. It was an opportunity, a chance to grow, to learn, and perhaps even to connect with someone remarkable. Princess Alara was more than a royal figure. She was intelligent, perceptive, and unexpectedly understanding. Marcus felt a spark of admiration and curiosity, and he knew that the week ahead would reveal much more. He lay on his floating bed, staring at the shifting lights above. Outside, the city glowed softly, floating against the dark sky. He thought about the challenges still to come. The remaining days of the 7-day bonding ceremony would test endurance, intellect, and emotional connection. But Marcus was ready. Humans were resourceful, adaptable, and resilient. And in that moment, he realized something else. This was more than a diplomatic assignment. This was the beginning of an adventure, one that could change his life, the perception of humanity, and perhaps even the relationship between Earth and Verelia forever. Marcus whispered to himself, a small smile forming. Bring it on. I'm ready for whatever comes next. The 4th day of the 7-day bonding ceremony dawned on Verelia with a sky painted in shades of rose and amber. Marcus awoke in his floating quarters with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. He had survived the first 3 days, physical trials, mental challenges, and social tests. But today promised something more difficult, the political trial. The Verelian royal family valued not only strength and intelligence, but also diplomacy. Their court was filled with noble families, advisors, and visiting dignitaries, each with their own interests and ambitions. Marcus, as a human, was both a novelty and a potential threat in their eyes. His success, or failure, could influence interstellar relations for years to come. He dressed in ceremonial robes that shimmered faintly in response to his emotions. The lighter hues of blue and gold reflected calmness and confidence, though he did his best to steady the nerves churning in his stomach. An attendant arrived silently at the door. Marcus, Princess Alara awaits in the council hall. Today, your adaptability and diplomacy will be tested. Marcus nodded and followed the attendant through the palace corridors. As he walked, he considered the complexities of the day ahead. Unlike the previous trials, these challenges could not be solved by agility or problem-solving alone. Today, perception, tact, and understanding of alien politics would determine his success. When he entered the council hall, Marcus was struck by its grandeur. Floating platforms held dozens of representatives from various planets. Their appearances ranged from crystalline beings to multi-limbed creatures, each displaying intricate ceremonial attire. At the center, the royal family sat watching silently, while Princess Alara floated beside him. A tall, angular diplomat from a neighboring planet stood and addressed the assembly. His tone was measured, but the words carried subtle implications. A challenge to the legitimacy of a human marrying a Verelian princess. Marcus felt the tension immediately. He knew that any misstep could be interpreted as disrespect, not just toward the princess, but toward humanity itself. Marcus took a deep breath. "Honored delegates," he began, speaking slowly and deliberately, "I understand that humans are new to Verelia. Our customs differ, but respect, trust, and cooperation are universal. My goal is not to replace your traditions, but to honor them and work alongside them." A murmur ran through the hall. Some delegates appeared impressed, while others exchanged skeptical glances. Marcus continued, emphasizing human adaptability, ingenuity, and the value of cultural exchange. Princess Alara stood beside him, supporting his words with subtle gestures and energy patterns that amplified their meaning. Marcus realized that their bond, accidental though it was, had given him a unique advantage. They worked as a team. His words carried her influence, and her presence strengthened his credibility. The first challenge ended with cautious approval. The diplomats exchanged whispers, evaluating his performance. Marcus felt a glimmer of pride. Humans might be underestimated, but they could navigate complex social dynamics when they combined logic, empathy, and courage. The next trial was more personal. Marcus was asked to demonstrate loyalty and commitment to the bond. He and Alara were led to a chamber filled with floating orbs, each containing a memory or emotion. They had to navigate the orbs together, responding appropriately to each one. The exercise tested emotional intelligence, trust, and intuition. At first, Marcus struggled. The emotions were alien, subtle, and overwhelming. He misinterpreted one orb and nearly caused a disruption. Alara's hand touched his, steadying him. "Focus, Marcus," she whispered. "Feel it with me, not against me." He followed her lead. Slowly, he began to sense the rhythms and currents of the orbs. They moved as a single unit, responding to each challenge in harmony. When the final orb glowed brightly, signaling success, Marcus felt a surge of relief. He realized that this trial was not just about understanding Varelian emotions, it was about understanding each other. The afternoon brought a physical and strategic challenge. Marcus and Alara were placed on a large floating platform that resembled a moving puzzle. Obstacles shifted constantly, requiring quick thinking, coordination, and trust. Competitors from other cultures were present to observe, adding pressure. Marcus hesitated at first, unsure of the platform's unpredictable movements. Alara's calm presence steadied him. "Do not fight it," she said. "Move with it, anticipate, adapt, and act together." He followed her advice. Slowly, they navigated the platform, their movements synchronized. Marcus discovered something remarkable. Humans excelled when the rules were unfamiliar. Where others relied on rigid training, he relied on creativity, observation, and quick adaptation. Each obstacle they overcame earned him subtle nods of respect from the onlookers. By evening, Marcus felt exhausted but triumphant. The final challenge of the day was a social ritual in which he had to negotiate a symbolic agreement between rival factions of the court. The exercise tested diplomacy, tact, and emotional intelligence simultaneously. Marcus approached the task as he had approached all challenges, carefully, thoughtfully, and with confidence in human ingenuity. He listened to each faction's concerns, acknowledged their traditions, and proposed solutions that respected both their interests and the customs of Virelia. Alara supported him silently, amplifying his words through subtle gestures and energy patterns. Together, they turned a tense negotiation into a cooperative agreement. The room responded with murmurs of approval, and even the skeptical diplomats seemed impressed. As the day ended, Marcus and Alara walked along a terrace overlooking the floating city. The sky glowed with shades of purple and orange, reflecting the lights of the platforms below. "You have done well today," Alara said softly. "You have impressed not only me but also the court. Humans are surprising." Marcus chuckled. "I think humans have a way of thriving in situations others find impossible. We adapt. We learn. We find solutions." Alara's gaze softened. "You are more than a guest or a participant in a ceremony. You are someone I respect, and perhaps someone I trust." Marcus felt a warmth in his chest. The accidental bond, which had caused so much anxiety, was transforming into a genuine connection. He realized that he was no longer participating, merely out of duty. He wanted to succeed, to honor the bond, and to understand the princess beside him. That night, Marcus reflected on the trials of the day. He had faced political challenges, complex emotional exercises, and demanding physical tasks. He had not only survived, but had demonstrated the adaptability, creativity, and intelligence that humans were known for. But more importantly, he had begun to understand the essence of the bond. It was not just a ritual or a ceremonial obligation. It was a partnership, built on trust, respect, and understanding. And with Princess Alara by his side, He felt that anything was possible. As he drifted into sleep on his floating bed, Marcus whispered to himself, "Humans can rise to any challenge. Let's see what tomorrow brings." The 7th day of the 7-day bonding ceremony arrived with a sky painted in shimmering golds and blues. Marcus awoke with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. Today was the final day, the day when the bond would either be formally accepted or respectfully dissolved. He had survived every trial, navigated every challenge, and learned more about Varelian culture than he had thought possible. But he knew that this final stage would test everything: courage, intelligence, creativity, and the trust he had built with Princess Alara. He dressed carefully in ceremonial robes provided by the palace. The robes shimmered softly, reflecting his emotions. A deep blue highlighted calmness and focus, while golden threads glimmered to signify determination. Marcus took a deep breath. Humans were often underestimated, but they thrived under pressure. He was ready. An attendant arrived silently at the door. "Marcus, Princess Alara awaits in the Hall of Unity. The final ceremony begins." Marcus followed, his heart pounding. The Hall of Unity was massive, its ceiling open to the sky, allowing the light of Virelia's twin suns to pour in. The walls were translucent, reflecting the floating city below. Crowds of dignitaries, nobles, and curious citizens filled the hall, their forms glowing softly. Marcus realized that the entire city seemed to watch this moment. Princess Alara stood at the center, her robes shimmering like liquid silver. Her calm presence gave Marcus confidence. He joined her, bowing slightly. She smiled faintly. "The final ceremony tests more than skill," she said softly. "It tests courage, trust, and understanding. Are you ready?" Marcus nodded. "I am ready." The first part of the ceremony was a physical and mental trial combined. Platforms floated in a complex maze above the hall. Obstacles moved unpredictably, and the pair had to navigate the maze together, responding to energy currents and solving puzzles along the way. Marcus felt the familiar tension of the first trial, but now he moved with experience and confidence. Alara led gracefully and Marcus followed, matching her rhythm. When an obstacle required unconventional thinking, Marcus used human ingenuity. He created a makeshift bridge by redirecting energy flows with his hands, a solution no Varelian had thought of. The crowd gasped. Alara's eyes widened slightly, a mix of surprise and admiration. They reached the center of the maze together, completing the task flawlessly. Marcus realized something profound. Humans could not only adapt, they could innovate. And sometimes that innovation surpassed even the expectations of advanced alien cultures. The second part of the ceremony was a social and diplomatic challenge. Representatives from several neighboring planets were present, each observing and evaluating Marcus. They posed questions designed to test his understanding of Varelian law, human culture, and the implications of interstellar relations. Marcus approached each question carefully. He spoke with honesty, tact, and insight. He acknowledged differences in customs without disrespect and offered solutions that honored both human and Varelian traditions. Princess Alara mirrored his words subtly with gestures and energy patterns, enhancing their impact. By the end of this challenge, even the skeptical dignitaries nodded in approval. Marcus felt a surge of pride. He had proven that humans were not only adaptable, but capable of navigating complex political and social situations with skill and integrity. The final part of the ceremony was deeply personal. Marcus and Alara were asked to demonstrate their bond through a shared challenge of trust. They were guided to a platform suspended above the city, connected only by threads of glowing energy. The challenge required them to move in perfect harmony while balancing on shifting currents and solving a sequence of puzzles together. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. One wrong move could result in failure. He glanced at Alara. Her expression was calm, yet her eyes reflected trust in him. Marcus took a deep breath and focused on the energy threads. He moved deliberately, letting instinct and observation guide him. Alara's presence was a steadying force. She synchronized her movements with his, guiding him without speaking. Slowly, they advanced, overcoming each challenge with precision. Marcus realized that this trial was not just about skill, it was about partnership, trust, and mutual understanding. At the final step, Marcus had to make a leap of faith. The platform below him shifted unexpectedly. For a moment he hesitated. Then he remembered everything he had learned. The importance of observation, creativity, trust, and courage. He leaped, extending his hand. Ilara caught it effortlessly. Together they completed the final step. The hall erupted in light and sound. Energy streams pulsed in celebration, reflecting the successful completion of the bond. The king and queen approached, their expressions proud. "Marcus," the king said, "you have proven yourself worthy of this bond. Not only have you demonstrated respect for our customs, but you have also shown courage, intelligence, and loyalty. The bond with Princess Ilara is now recognized." Marcus felt a rush of relief and pride. It was official. The accidental bond that had caused so much anxiety was now a celebrated union. Ilara turned to him, her expression soft. "Marcus, I see now that this bond is not just a ceremony. It is real. You have earned my trust, my respect, and perhaps more." Marcus smiled. "I never expected this, but I am grateful for it. You have taught me more than I could have imagined about your culture, your world, and yourself." The final moments of the ceremony involved a symbolic exchange. Light, energy flowed between Marcus and Ilara, forming a shimmering bond visible to all. The crowd cheered, and Marcus realized that this was more than a personal triumph. It was a moment of human achievement. Humanity, represented by him, had earned respect in the court of an advanced alien civilization. After the ceremony, the celebrations began. Music, light displays, and floating dances filled the city. Marcus and Ilara moved among the guests, receiving congratulations from dignitaries and citizens alike. Humans were no longer strangers. They were recognized as capable, adaptable, and honorable. Later, in a private moment, Marcus and Ilara walked along a terrace overlooking the floating city. The twin suns were setting, casting long shadows and bathing the city in warm light. "You have exceeded all expectations," Ilara said softly. "Not just as a participant in the bond, but as a human. Your courage and ingenuity are remarkable." Marcus laughed lightly. "I had a good teacher." Ilara smiled, her eyes glowing faintly. Perhaps this bond was meant to happen, not by accident, but by fate. Marcus felt a warmth in his chest, a mixture of pride, admiration, and something deeper. The accidental wedding had turned into an extraordinary journey. He had faced challenges that tested every aspect of his being and emerged stronger, wiser, and respected. That night, Marcus lay in his quarters, reflecting on the past week. He had entered Viralia as a guest, uncertain and anxious. He had faced trials of body, mind, and spirit. He had navigated politics, culture, and diplomacy. And he had formed a connection with Princess Ilara that was genuine, mutual, and celebrated. He realized something important. Humans were capable of more than they often believed. They could adapt, survive, and thrive even in the most alien circumstances. They could inspire respect, form bonds across cultures, and leave lasting impressions. Marcus smiled as he drifted to sleep. The floating city of Viralia glimmered outside his window, alive with light, energy, and possibility. Tomorrow he would wake as both a human diplomat and a recognized partner of the Virelian royal family. The galaxy would see what humans could do, bold, clever, and adaptable even among the stars.